Welcome back, and it has been a minute, and I have news for you. The Being Human podcast is now the Walker Way podcast. The reason that I started the Being Human podcast was actually because, first off, everyone's like, "You have such a good voice. You should do a podcast." And I was like, and then I began to let's do what's the perfect title? And something that was super alive for me, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, was being a real man. What is my journey to being the man that I truly want to be versus the man that I was told that I was supposed to be? And then I was like, okay, being a real man, that was kind of like the name of the podcast that I wanted to have. But then what I realized is, so many things that are like being a man are really being human issues. So that's where I came up with the Being Human podcast. And I love it. And I'm so emotionally attached to it. But I've really realized that where I really want to transition and consolidate everything and all my focus in is the Walker Way. And the Walker Way is something that was rooted in the very early stages of my yoga teaching journey. Because people used to always ask me, what style of yoga do I teach? And I would kind of like shrug my shoulders, and I just like, it's kind of like, it's just the Chris Walker way. And so, what is the Chris Walker way, or what is the Walker way? The Walker way is a way that was inspired by others. I have teachers, we can call them gurus. There's podcasts, there's wise people, there's friends, there's family, there's all these influences that I have in life. And the Walker way is listening to it, hearing it, feeling, tuning into all that wisdom and knowledge that's out there to then figure out, how am I going to walk my way? Oh, you're my teacher and you're really good at what you do, but I'm not going to copy you. I'm not going to try to be you, but something about you is inspiring. And can I use that inspiration to help me be a little bit more connected to my authentic self? So what is the Walker way? The Walker way is my way, but I'm sharing my way. I'm sharing the way of even all the guests that I'm going to have on this podcast to hopefully inspire you to walk your way, not to walk my way. Because when we think about it, there's no one size fits all approach to living life or doing any of the activities or practices that exist in life. So, when I think about yoga and I look at all these shapes that are out there, okay, here's this 14-year-old boy practicing yoga in India, and then we're going to say, make the shape like him, or hey, look at her, she's an ex-dancer or ex-acrobat, let's make shapes like her, or that person's been doing yoga for 20 years, let's make a shape like them. It's like, that doesn't really work for me. And I think actually, if I try to do that, it's no matter how much I practice, it's going to be a detriment to my body. So how do I drop into thinking, okay, what does this shape, and I'm using shape as a metaphor, what does this shape actually mean? Well, if we try to move our body toward a shape, we feel an intention, or we feel a sensation in our body. So the cues in yoga, as this example of making a shape, ground here, open here, move this thing here, make this longer, make this shorter, whatever it might be, is to support us in being more intentional in a pose. So it is not about let's do yoga a certain way, but by listening to this way, feeling into this way, we allow ourselves and our body to move in the way that our body was made to move. Because my body, 6'5", 210 pounds, moves in a different way than your body. So let's use these cues, let's use the teachings of the physical practice of yoga to help humans move their way, just as it helped me move or walk my way. And if we use yoga as an analogy for the rest of life, what are other practices? Vinyasa, I always laugh. Vinyasa is actually a Sanskrit word that is broken down into V and nyasa, which means to move in a special way, or to place in a special way, or to move with intention. And so if we think about life, is everything not just vinyasa? Are we not living life in a series of a practice leads into another practice, leads into another practice? And in each one of those practices, we have a choice to do what we think we're supposed to do, or to choose an intention and be intentional in our own unique way in that practice. But then for us to do that, we have to know our way. We have to begin to know ourselves. And in my life, man, there's been so many times when I truly was at the most disconnected, lost version of myself when I realized that, was I ever walking my way? And when I look back on life, there's these super pivotal events that I didn't even know were happening when they were happening. For example, there was the choosing to just get good grades and be an athlete over being an artist. When I was a kid, I used to be in plays. I was the male lead in my 5th, 7th, and 8th grade play, and I loved it. But at the same time, I also felt kind of embarrassed being the lead, wanting to be the lead, because that wasn't what people like me were supposed to do. I was just supposed to be good at sports. Let's go play basketball. Basketball leads to high school. That leads to a scholarship. And then all of a sudden, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But I really wanted to be an artist. And it wasn't until maybe 4 or 5 years ago when some guy at some entrepreneur meetup looked at me and he's like, "But you're not an entrepreneur, you're an artist." And I was so pissed off. I was like, "What do you mean I'm not an entrepreneur? Of course I am. I do all, like, oh, I do all these things. Like I do this and I do this. This is what entrepreneurs do." He said, "Oh, well, you have an entrepreneurial spirit, but everything I see, you're an artist. You look to create." And I was like, wow. Taking a big, solid moment to let my ego take a backseat in that moment. And I was like, man, you're right. I'm an artist. So why am I fighting it? Oh, because I was trying to walk somebody else's way. And then I look at how many different times that's happened in my life. In the corporate world, when I decided to be an electrical engineering major, I did that because I met with my high school guidance counselor. I said, "Hey, I'm good at math and science, and I want to make more money than both my parents combined when I graduate from high school or I graduate from college." Why? Well, because we didn't grow up with a lot, and I didn't want to have to struggle financially. And this feels like what I should do. This feels like the way that I should walk. And so he said, "Okay, well, finance and engineering." And I'm like, finance didn't make any sense to me, so I decided to be an engineer. And then I moved into tech sales. And we had the senior guys on the team, and we had this QBR. And the senior guy on the team, I'll never forget his name. And I don't want to call him out on a podcast, even though I know he'll never watch this. But in a QBR at EMC, he basically talked shit about everything that existed in this world except for being a field sales rep at our company. So everybody that left our company, they couldn't handle. They couldn't handle being in the major leagues. Anybody that moved from sales to marketing or from sales to sales enablement, they couldn't hack it. And oh man, I can hack it. So I can hack it. So that means I'm going to stick with it. No matter what signs in my physical body, in my mental body were like alarm bells going off, I told myself that I could hack it. So I was going to hack it and I was going to stick through it. And in that sticking through it, doing what I thought I should do, walking the way that I thought I was supposed to walk, my life came crumbling down. I had a horrible relationship with my now ex-wife. Really can't truly remember any successfully, deeply connected, intimate relationship that I had. I had nights and days and mornings full of anxiety and stress because I was doing this purpose that I thought was right for me, but it wasn't. But I really wasn't connected to purpose, so I didn't know myself well enough to even know how to walk my way. And then I found yoga. And yoga was a really beautiful thing for me on so many levels. But the one level in which I think it was most beautiful is because when I started yoga and then I started teaching yoga, actually, I shouldn't say when I started teaching yoga. That moment when you finish your yoga teacher training and you're about to start teaching yoga, I got confronted with a really, really harsh reality. Nobody looked like me and nobody sounded like me. So I didn't have anybody to copy. There was no teacher for me to imitate and be like, oh, if I do it like they do, then I'll be loved like their students love them. Because I'm like, that's so fake. That's so phony. And they're so different than me that I can't even pretend to figure out how the hell I'm going to imitate them. So I'm going to have to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to be me. I'm going to have to do it the Walker way and have faith. And if it doesn't work, well, then I'll get a glaring sign that says, well, you weren't meant to be a yoga teacher. And I think we're 2,500 plus classes, 50,000 plus students down. And I guess the Chris Walker way worked, but it only worked because it was my way. I leaned in to being different. I leaned into being myself and had faith that that was enough. Now, that sounds really good coming out of my mouth right there, but that wasn't always the case. I actually had a moment where I was probably like a little less than a year into teaching yoga. I'd still taught like 500 yoga classes, mainly in London and California, but I got to Bali. And I got to Bali and I was sitting in this yoga class with like 85 women, or 85 people, maybe like 75 women, so probably a few gay guys and like 3 guys that came with their girlfriend and me. And I was actually there with my partner at the time. And I was struggling in Bali. No yoga studio would hire me. I was sitting like, why am I here? What am I doing? What the fuck am I doing with my life? And I left that class, and that night I left my mom a voice note, and I was crying. And I was just like, Bali's rejecting me. I'm coming back to California. I'm moving home. And oh my God, I can't even, like, I'm like reliving this as I'm sharing that story. And told my girlfriend that the next day, or my girlfriend at the time, and she said no. It's like, don't do it. This yoga world, they need more different. They need you. You represent what is needed, and it might not be represent in this moment what feels like it's being accepted. So I gave it a chance. And I kept pursuing it. I said, all right, we'll keep it going until the end of my visa. And I had like 3 months left on my visa. And I kept going. And there's been trials and tribulations, but it's like looking back on it now, it's like the rest is history. Because I committed to walking my way. I committed to being inspired by others, but not imitating others. And that laid the foundation to create what I've created for myself and how I share. And because that's how I share is my way, I also want other people to be inspired to walk their way. So when I look at my journey to walk my way, to live life the Walker way, there are 3 key insights that I really am grateful for that have come out of it. And it is the acronym AIC: awareness, inspiration, courage. Awareness. How did I become aware of self? And there is what I feel like the self that is my body, that is my mind, that is my emotions. But those things are always changing. And in yoga, we call the truest self Atman, like our soul, like the essence of who we are. How do we take the journey to connect to that version of us, to see what they want to do, and utilize that awareness to then instill our values, and then how do we show up each day? So it's not about, oh, this person seems like they're doing it right, I'm going to copy them. But what is it? What is it about myself that I can become more aware of to then be able to use others, to use others' successes, to use others' teachings? And that is where the I comes in, inspiration. So from a place of awareness of self, and maybe even double A, awareness and acceptance of self, we then can be inspired versus imitating. To be inspired by those around us. There's this famous saying that's going around all the time that comparison is the thief of joy. And yes, if I compare you and believe that I'm not enough unless I reach what you have, that is going to be the thief of joy, because that's always moving these goalposts along in life. But if we can see someone and be inspired by what they've created, where they are, what they've done, how they serve, what value they bring to themselves and the world around them, how do we let that inspiration lift us up, motivate us into connecting deeper and showing up more for ourselves, and then showing up more for either those closest to us or those that we just want to serve in this world, whatever it might be. And then that leads us to courage, the courage to be ourselves. And oh man, is that tough. Because guess what? when we put the masks on, when we do the little performance gig, and somebody looks at us and says, fuck that guy, he's so full of shit. We're like, oh, well, I just put the wrong mask on and I'm going to do a better job acting next time. It still probably hurts, but there's something about us. It doesn't quite hurt as much because there's a mask or there's some armor on that deflects that hateful comment. But if we take the masks off, if we take all the armor off and we show up in our truest, most authentic version of ourselves, and then some person's like, fuck you, I don't like you, you're too much, you're not enough, or all the variations of those two comments, that arrow, that goes deep. That is like the woundings of woundings, being our most authentic version of ourselves and have some person shitting on us. That fucking hurts, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts or ways around that. That sucks. But then there's also the other side of this same coin, which is showing up fully as yourself, having the courage to be yourself, having the courage to be different, having this deep level of vulnerability that is just showing up as you, and some person looking at you, hearing you, seeing you, and saying, I can fuck with that person. I like them. I love them. I'm going to rock with them. I want to be on their team. Oh, man, that heart filling, not the I did this to get this, but to do something for yourself, to show up authentically, to be seen and accepted. Oh man, that feels so good. But then to realize that if we are keeping the masks on because they're safe, and even if we do get accepted, we avoid the pain of being kind of shit on, being told the most authentic version of ourselves isn't enough. But then at the exact same time, there is the little bit of a pain that's saying, oh, I'm only being liked because I acted this way, or because I performed this way, or because I portrayed myself in this way. I'm only being liked because I'm doing what I think that I'm supposed to be doing. So then we have a choice. Which pain do you want to incur? The pain that is walking the way that you're supposed to be walking, knowing that you're kind of betraying the truest version of yourself to get acceptance, to get likes, to be a part of whatever the thing is, or the pain that is being who you really are and recognizing that no matter how much we try, we're never going to be everybody's cup of tea. But knowing that that second pain gives us access to the win, the being accepted, being in love, connecting to the truest version of ourselves, and being connected to the people that ride with that love that want to be a part of that us. So then we have a choice. And what I look through in this podcast and what I hope to be able to share with you, with the guests that I'm bringing on, is how all of us humans are in this final dichotomy, this struggle, this tipping point that says, do I do what I'm supposed to do, or do I walk my way? Do I perform and then I'll be accepted and I'll be loved and I'll be safe? Or can I just be me and overcome all my limiting beliefs and recognize that I, as I am today, am enough? So that's the choice. And how that looks different for all of us. But I hope if you tune in, you will hear a little bit more of the Chris Walker way. You're going to hear the way of some other awesome, inspiring human beings. And I hope by listening to the Walker way, by listening to some others' ways, that you'll find that courage to get a little bit more aware of who you are, be inspired, and have the courage to walk your way.